Hello, I'm Petrina Amani. I'm back for another edition of my video on a new topic that is basically talked about more frequently. It's getting more popularity. Um, it's not the norm for the social sciences, but it's up and coming. And so I figured, it's very interesting. We'll talk about it. And it's NDEs, which is near-death experiences. And so, as social science guru, I definitely want to talk about it because it's a buzz. And like I said, there's naysayers about it, and there's people that are saying it's definitely happening. It has happened to them. So I figured I would, do some research on it. And as you know, I always make sure that I bring the most resourceful information using equitable and really groundbreaking material that's based on whether it's spirituality, we look at the Bible. If it's a topic that needs to be definitely looked at in the light of professionalism, then we get the latest books and the latest authors who are savvy, who know what they're talking about on the subject matter. If it's what we're doing today, I figured, you know what, let's just look at some journal articles. I mean, that's more concrete, right? So I was like, I got some journal articles together because we just can't talk off the top of our heads, right? We have to really like research this thing and see like, what are the professionals are saying about this, and what are the people who experience it? What are they saying? And so that's today's video. And again, my name is Petrina Amani. I am a LPC, licensed professional counselor, and I'm a doctoral candidate. So I'm a doctoral student. I should be graduating hopefully soon, fingers crossed. And so I guess let's get started, right? All right, so I don't have a PowerPoint today, but I don't have a presentation, but what I do have are let's just get to the journal articles, right? So I'm going to be switching back and forth. Something that my mother said, I need to remember this, is she says, your videos are great. This is all mothers, right? They're so encouraging. This is supposed to have been for August, but I'm doing it now because, I had a month of a comp exam that took 1 month to complete. So it pushed my series for 12, one a month for the year 2021 back. So that's why we're a little late. So I'm going to have to speed it up because I'm doing 12, right? So this is the eighth one. And my mom, she said, hey, why don't you have people subscribe? I didn't even think of that. She's more savvy than I am. I was just like, oh, I'm just doing this because it's fun. I enjoy it. Next, if you can, please subscribe. And next month, I'll be doing, or for this month, September, I will be doing, what's the next one? Oh, I will be using the DSM, right? So I will use that for the next 9 personality traits, which is also fascinating. So that you get a preview of what I'm going to do. So let's get started, right? Okay. Yeah. Okay. My share screen is not sharing. All right, there we go. Okay, so let's start with the journal articles. Okay, so this is the journal articles that I found. There are many, but this kind of was like the top five. And some of them are kind of difficult to understand. You really have to sit and read it. We don't have a lot of time, so I'm just going to focus on the highlights of each one. And so if you could take a picture of it, feel free so that you can have it. At least you can say, this is the empirical facts on NDE. All right, so let's start with the first one. And it's called Getting Comfortable with Near-Death Experiences. My near-death experience, a telephone call from God. I am going to be reading this because this is actually Tony Cisoria. He's actually a doctor and he had a near-death experience. So we definitely want to hear from him. So he wrote it up and put it in a journal article so that we can read his experience. And I'm going to read this whole thing except for, I guess, we'll right here before it talks about explaining science, just so we can have a narrative of an example. It was beautiful August day at Sleepy Hollow Lake in Athens, New York in 1994. The occasion was my in-laws celebrating their annual group birthday gathering. About 20 relatives and their siblings were in attendance while the children ran amok, screaming and playing. I prepared the party barbecue. We had gathered on the second floor of a lakeside pavilion. The group level included picnic tables and barbecue pits. A payphone was attached to the wall on the side of the building. As the thought occurred to me to call my mother and check on her, I remembered seeing a few light sprinkles of rain. In the midst of the revelry and chaos, and unbeknownst to me, the beautiful sunny day had surrendered to a powerful dark storm cloud moving swiftly in over the lake. I ambled around the building to the payphone and dialed my mother's familiar number. I let the phone ring 8 times, but there was no answer. With my left hand, I pulled the phone hand piece away from my face to hang it up. When it was about a foot away from my face, I heard a deafening crack. Simultaneously, I saw a brilliant flash of light exit the phone handpiece I was holding. A powerful ball of lightning had struck the pavilion, traversed through the phone, striking me in the face as its massive electric charge raced to ground. The force of the lightning blast threw my body backwards like a rag doll. Despite the stunning physical trauma, I realized something strange and inexplicable was happening. As my body was blown backwards, I felt me move forward instead, yet I seemed also to stand motionless and bewildered, staring at the phone dangled in front of me. Nothing made sense. At that moment, I heard my mother-in-law scream from the top of the stairs above me. She raced down the stairs towards me. I felt like a deer in headlights. As she approached, I could see she was looking beyond me to my right and headed that in that direction. She was obvious to me standing there. I turned to see where she was going. Suddenly, I realized what was going on. A motionless body was laying on the ground some 10 feet behind me. To appearances, the person was dead. To inspection, the person resembled me. To my astonishment, another look confirmed it was me. I watched as a woman who had been waiting to use the phone dropped to her knees and began CPR. I spoke to the people around my body, but they could not see or hear me. I could see and hear everything they did and said. It suddenly occurred to me that I was thinking normal thoughts in the same mental vernacular I had always possessed. At that moment, I suddenly had one simple, ineloquent, and rude thought. Holy crap, I'm dead. This cosmic realization of consciousness meant that my self-awareness was no longer in the lifeless body on the ground. I, whatever I was now, was capable of thought and reason. Interestingly, there was no strong emotion accompanied my apparent death. I was shocked, certainly, but otherwise I felt no reaction to what should have been the most emotional of life's events. Seeing no point in staying with my body, my thoughts then moved to walking away. I turned and started to climb the stairs to where I saw my family still was. As I started to climb, I looked down at the stairs like I would normally do. I saw that as I reached the third stair, my leg began to dissolve. I remember being disconcerted that by the time I reached the top of the stairs, I had lost all form entirely and instead was just a ball of energy and thought. My mind was racing frantically, trying to record and make sense of what was happening. At the top of the first flight, the stairs went up and left into the second flight. Instead of bothering with the stairs, I passed through the wall into the room where everyone was. I went diagonally through the room over my wife, who was painting children's faces. She had one child in front of her, one behind that person, and one to the left. I had clear realization that my family would be fine. Dispassionately, I departed from the building. Once outside the building, I was immersed in a bluish white light that had a shimmering appearance as if I was swimming underwater in a crystal clear stream. The sunlight was penetrating through it. The visual was accompanied by a feeling of absolute love and peace. What does the term absolute love and peace mean? For example, scientists use the term absolute zero to describe a temperature at which no molecular motion exists, a singular and pure state. That was what I felt. I had fallen into a pure positive flow of energy. I could see the flow of this energy. I could see it flow through the fabric of everything. I reasoned that this energy was quantifiable. It was something measurable and palpable. As I flowed in the current of this stream, which seemed to have both velocity and direction, I saw some of the high points and low points in my life pass by, but nothing in depth. I became ecstatic at the possibility of where I was going. I was aware of every moment of this experience, conscious of every millisecond, even though I could feel that time did not exist. I remember thinking, this is the greatest thing that can ever happen to anyone. Suddenly, I was back in my body. It was so painful. My mouth burned and my left foot felt like someone had tucked a red hot poker through my ankle. I was still unconscious, but I could feel the woman who was doing CPR stop and kneel before me. It seemed like minutes before I could open my eyes. I wanted to say to her, thank you for helping me. Nonsensically, all that came out was, it's okay, I'm a doctor. Shortly after I regained consciousness, camp security arrived and requested that an ambulance be called, which to their frustration, I promptly refused. Although I realized I probably made little sense, the truth about lightning strikes is that you are either dead or alive, and there is no such, and there is not much in between. In retrospect, I obviously wasn't thinking clearly, but at the time I was still reeling from what I had just experienced. My family drove me the 2.5 hours home to Ona, Wanatona, New York, wobbly and confused. Once there, I saw my local cardiologist and neurologist who did all the appropriate test examinations. They told me how lucky I was to be alive. I was able to resume work 2 weeks after the initial lightning strike, when my brain seemed to function normally again. In the weeks and months after the lightning strike, however, I changed in many ways. The story of my developing musical abilities and composition as a result of this event had been touched on in several books and documentaries. Wow. Wow, 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 wow. So that is an account of a near-death experience by a doctor. Okay, the next article. All right, I want to show you the next article, okay? So let me share again. Okay. Have to move it down, I couldn't get to it. All right. This is the next one. Getting comfortable with death and near-death experiences, an essay in medicine and philosophy. Now, this is Raymond Moody. He is a famous writer on near-death experiences, and he has had so many cases and interviewed so many people, and you could hear about, how he got started. Very interesting. So he's like one of the leading researchers on this topic. But what he does is he gives some good information. Definitely, if you can read the article, or if you're so interested, you want me to send it to you, I can definitely send it to you. But here's what he says. He talks about the characteristics of near-death experiences. Survivors of close call, I'm here. Survivors of close calls with death usually recount their transcendent experiences in the form of a travel narrative. They tell us that their consciousness leaves their body and rises upward, where they witness the resuscitation procedure going on below. They seem to pass through a dark enclosure they may compare to a brilliant white light. However articulate they may be, they say that the experience is ineffable and indescribable. Words are inadequate. They say that in the bright light, they feel comfort, joy, peace, and love so intense as to be almost palpable. They say they perceive the spirit of deceased, they actually see spirits of deceased loved ones that have departed, relatives and friends who seem to be there to welcome them. These patients also say that they experience in vivid detail the events of their lives in a sort of holographic, full color panorama. Although it takes only an instant, they report reviewing the actions of their lives, and it goes on. So these are some common things or traits associated with NDE. And patients differ in how they go back. At one moment, they were immersed in the light, and the next moment, they were back in the hospital bed with no sense of transition. Other patients say they were told, perhaps by one of their deceased loved ones, that they had to go back. that they had things left to complete. Yet other patients say they were given a choice. They could either stay in the light and continue the experience or return to the life they had been living. Most commonly, these patients say that for themselves, they would have preferred to stay in the light. However, they chose to go back for someone else, usually to raise their young children. Upon returning, these patients remarked that their near-death experience profoundly changed their lives. They say that the experience convinced them personally that there is an afterlife, so they no longer fear death. Yeah, a few I've read have said that. These patients say that whatever they might have been pursuing in their lives before, power, wealth, fame, or something else, the experience convinced them that most important goal in life is to learn to love. Although they still find that goal as difficult to realize as anyone else, their near-death experiences commit them to pursuing love. Not everyone who recovers from a near-death experience event reports a near-death experience, nor does everyone who had a near-death experience report the whole prototypical series of events. Some recall only a brief out-of-body experience with a view of their own body below, followed by a quick return. Others get only as far as the dark passageway, while others proceed all the way into the light. We do not know the reason for all these variations. Notably, much of what's common sense suggests about near-death experience turns out not to be true. First, near-death experience does not seem to be dreams. Dreams seem less real than ordinary waking realities. NDEs seem hyper real, more real. This is an example that someone said, more real than ordinary waking reality. Patients describe their NDE as almost a antithesis of dreams and deny dreamlike qualities. So there are some people who try to make I guess excuses or explanations to what else it could be besides actual NDEs, and this is one of them. And there's some others that I will talk about. The occurrences of NDEs does not seem relative to patients' prior religious training or beliefs. So that's something that they notice, that you don't have to be religious to have an NDE. Many people with no prior interest or background in religion report powerful NDEs after surviving grave medical crisis. NDEs are not related to specific medical conditions. Patients with infections, trauma, cardiac arrest, complications of childbirth, and many other diverse conditions have been reported. They report NDEs. There is a wide variation in patient ages, for the very young to the very old to every age in between. So that's something that they noticed as well. Not only that it doesn't depend on any religious experience, but also it could be any age, and it doesn't matter what they die from. They could die from various medical problems and still have an NDE. Attempts to explain NDE in physical and neuropsychological terms have postulated complex seizures or brain anoxia, basically like lack of oxygen to the brain. There has also been explanation of NDEs that, maybe it's a seizure that people are having, or maybe, there's not enough oxygen to the brain. So they're having these experiences that are not really that they're out of their body, or that their spirit actually went somewhere. One problem with this explanation is that typical NDE phenomena often occur among deathbed bystanders. So these are called SDEs, which are shared death experiences. These are the people in the hospital rooms. These are the people that were there when the person was dying. So they're considered bystanders. And they are reporting that that NDE and SDEs are not caused by brain hypoxia or atypical seizures. So there are people there who, I think there's another article that talks about, or is it here? SDEs, yes. Okay, let's talk about SDEs, shared death experience, people that are there when the person's dying. Bystanders or onlookers at the death of the patient may include physicians, the nurses, the medical personnel, the relatives, the friends of the dying. All of these types of bystanders report SDE that are often indistinguishable from NDE experiences. For example, bystanders sometimes say they saw a transparent replica of the dying person leave the person's body at the point of death, or they describe leaving their own body and rising up to accompany their dying loved ones part way towards the light. That's interesting. Onlookers at someone else's death also sometimes report that a brilliant light filled the room. They heard indescribable, beautiful music, and or they perceive apparitions of the dead person's deceased loved ones. Occasionally, onlookers empathetically report that they co-lived the life review, that they even got to see the life review. That is fascinating. And I mean, it's rare, but there are reports. And so this is by Moody, who has done several, like hundreds and hundreds of these reports and interviews. So he's just reporting what they have stressed, that this has happened. All right, so let's go to the next article. Let's see. Okay, so this article is we'd have to really be in depth with this article. I'm just going to share the two charts that they made, but this is near-death experiences, the neuroscience perspective on near-death experience. So they try to explain it through neuroscience. And I'm just going to go to the heart of this. They do say two things: that one, out-of-body experiences happen. It doesn't have to be near-death, in a near-death experience. Out-of-body experience, a few people have said that they have had this experience when they're sleeping at night. So they're trying to explain it. People have mystical feelings of oneness with near-death experience, but it's in this, I just want to look at two tables in the article. So here, this is the near-death experiences, the, I guess, symptoms or the observations of what has happened to them. And this is the neuroscience considerations, like what could be happening. So, when they see a tunnel, it could be retinal ischemia, which is within the systemic hypotension. I have no idea. I'm not a medical doctor, but retinal. So it must be within the eyes, something that's going on within the eyes, the nerve. Light, when they see light, it could be robust link and visual systems. So a lot of it, they say in this article, is associated to REM sleep. Or the same processes for REM sleep, and appearing dead, anatonia while alert. That is when you sleep and you have that paralysis, temporary paralysis, like when you sleep and you can't move your arms and legs. They're associating it to that. The out-of-body experiences, tempo tempo reparatio association. Okay, we're gonna Google that one. Your life review is activating memory in the face of danger. So the article talks about fight or flight system, that is probably under that. When you feel bliss, It's dopamine reward system. We know that dopamine is the happy, what is that within the endocrine system? Happy neurotransmitter. Yeah. Narrative qualities, that the stories come from the left hemisphere, the limbic system, in different regions of the brain, also the paranormal impressions, and the mystical oneness that they're talking about. There it is, serotonin receptors are responsible for that. So, I mean, that's interesting for all those who are interested in like the medical aspects. This is just a summary of, like I was saying, that they're associating it to REM sleep, and it says, to understand how conscious states interplay during a crisis near death, it is necessary to understand how the brainstem relates consciousness, and how the REM switch reacts in crisis to blend waking and REM consciousness, bringing about effective survival behaviors, which is the fight or flight system. These details are beyond the scope of this review and chronicled more fully in this table that we're looking at here. And it summarizes the evidence of it's an intrusion of the REM sleep that contributes to near-death experiences. So this is important because the vagal nerve is actually now being looked at for emotion. It's now being looked at for the five senses, and even sixth sense, and even having a sixth sense. So that seems to be another new topic of discussion in the social science world. So this is their, synopsis trying to explain NDEs. This article is pretty interesting. I went right to the results because these are all the common, it goes through all the common, this is example of burn survivors who have had near-death experiences, and they did a qualitative examination. Qualitative just basically means they got the narratives, or they got the live stories from the people who actually experienced it and put together this study. And so so these are the results, and there are several things that happen in all of the cases, or I should say not all, but most of the cases. There's a common theme or thread of what is being reported. One is feelings of peace and calmness. It says almost 2/3 of the burn survivors reported feeling peace and calm after their injuries. And so this is an example of one. I really felt a calmness. They caught that, related to when you're a child and your mother is holding you in her arms, is just the way I felt, even though I was flailing and on fire for several minutes. I never felt any pain at all. It was this is it. It's all over. You're not going to survive this. But there was a calmness and peacefulness that to this day, I never felt before. Oh, that's so, wow. This is a great, it's a great peace that comes over you. I would call it the most neutral place in the world. And the peace that comes over you is overwhelming. Like it just takes over your whole body, your whole being, really. That calmness I felt when I was burning in the car never left me the whole time I was in the hospital. Wow, they felt calm throughout. Oh, I should have said this is a very sensitive report, because it's with burn victims or tragedies of burn patients. There was just an immense peace, like everything is okay. I felt myself wrapped with warmth and peace, never left any kind of panic or, never desperation or anything, just peace and warmth. So that's one of them. Out of the body experiences and other things that people report. So one survivor said, um, I remember thinking how hard these guys were working to get me on that gurney. And then the next moment I was back looking at them from here. My body just looked at them at the ground level. And this one says, I had just gone on a nice walk, you know. Dad's like, there's no way you did not go on a walk. You did not go on any type of walk. I described the grounds of the hospital. There was a pond, the garden, the parking spot where people smoked their cigarettes. And my dad was just like, you've never been to this hospital. There's no way. So people say they, have out of body experiences. A third thing that's very common, of course, is seeing a light. It says 2/3 of the oral accounts mention seeing and encountering a light during NDE. I remember I was walking in the lighted hallway, and I was just walking, and it was stairs, and it was nicely lit. I was in this just bright light, like there was no ceiling, no floors, there was there is nothing, just floating there. Okay. Distressing near a death experience. A very small group reported extremely distressing experiences, not the prototypical positive NDEs. The participants above who saw the dark was scared to death, just scared to death because I didn't want to die. And thank God, when I woke up, I just thought you'd better start leading a better life. So if it happens again, maybe you'll see the light. I guess that's patient number 14 in 2015. When asked if he actually changed his life, the survivor replied, "You bet." Another participant initially had a negative experience and was sucked into something or pulled into something that was really hell, with cutting feelings and somebody else's diabolical plan. However, the experience then changed from him, and suddenly I was in a very calm, still sort of waiting place. I was waiting for someone pretty neat and powerful and others to show up. He earlier described the bluish light, which was healing and regenerating and incredibly healing and incredibly loving. When asked if he had a fear of dying, he responded, "It's sort of greatly diminished." So people, after having near-death experiences, do say that they are no longer afraid of death, and that they really want to change when they haven't seen the light. Encountering a deceased person is another thing that's commonly reported, or a spiritual being. Approximately 40% of the NDE accounts reported encountering some kind of spiritual being or deceased person. These encounters were pleasant and comforting for the most part. I was talking to a little girl while I was in the coma. I woke up and remember telling him, my husband, that I spoke to our little girl that we lost. And at the time, I did not know I was pregnant. I just remember telling him that I spoke to our little girl, and I was thinking it was our future daughter. And he had to inform me that you were pregnant. And I didn't know that, but I remembered talking to her and carrying on a nice conversation with her. Another survivor reported meeting his friend, the driver of a car who had died in the same accident. The friend said, "Don't worry about me, I'll be fine." Another burn survivor, number 31 in 2015, described encountering and having a pleasant discussion while in a medical induced coma with an African-American woman named Irene. His wife then spoke and described meeting the same individual on a multiple occasion in the hospital and talking, hugging, crying, and praying with her as the husband's fragile prognosis either worsened or improved over several weeks. When the husband came out of the coma and began to make significant progress, the African-American woman could not be located. The wife went to the nurse's station and began asking the staff if they knew where she could find Irene to tell her the good news, but no one knew or remembered seeing an individual meeting her description. Some survivors reported more of a religious presence. A female responded, patient 29 in 2014, burned over 70% of her body at the age of 7, gave this account. Jesus was standing at the end of the path, his hands upturned. He meets up with me and takes me by the hand, and he walked the rest of the path. He sat down on the park bench, and there were people around the bench, but I didn't know who they were. Then he lifted me up into his lap and said, I'm sorry that you're suffering the way you're going to suffer. But he said, you can stay with me or you can go home. I said, I want my mother. And he told me then I would see my mother. I looked at him and said, are you Jesus? And he just smiled and nodded. And then he told me it was time for me to go home. And he said, you're going to suffer as I did, but someday you'll understand why this has to be. So there were several incidences. Let's see, 2 female faces that brought enormous peace. There's just so much we could just get into. Anyway, another one is a review of your life that flashes before your eyes. That's another account. One person said, I saw everything at one time, everything in your entire life, just in a flash, everything. I sort of lived it. And I initially just laid out on the floor. I already know I'm going to die. And it just was like in an instant. I saw my entire life. I saw everything in an instant. All of a sudden, I started seeing, like he said, it was just all a flash of my life. I said, I'd seen myself as a child and all the injuries that I ever got, everything I ever accomplished. So very, very interesting. One person remembers laughing Christmas, just interesting. Some people, not your time yet, they hear. So not no. And I shook her head and turned and walked away. And I got very upset. Why can't I go? Like, why? Why can't I go with you? And I started screaming. As I screamed, no, like this. And that's when I felt my jolt and jolted up in the bed, screaming, no, and ripped all my air tubes out of my throat. Wow. And the nurse and I heard was a scream. Oh my God, she's alive. So a lot of people report not wanting to go back to their bodies because they feel such love being where they are. Last one, participant 29 was given a choice. You can stay with me or you can go home. She decided to go back. She wanted her mother. Oh, that's from what we read earlier. So it's very, very interesting things just about the peace. Some people, they hear music, they have different smells. Some people are saying that it could be the opiate painkillers. That's another excuse or reasoning or explanation that's being given. But the people say that these drugs may be responsible for some of the euphoria reported by our burn survivors. However, burn survivors report feeling of peace, calmness, and acceptance in some instances as the trauma was occurring and not by the time they got to the hospital. So all was happening even before they got the medication. So it's very, very, very fascinating things. I'm, if you want to review, I'm just scrolling so you could stop the video maybe and read for yourself. Oh, this one was very interesting about even suicide survivors. That would be interesting to read as well. So I'm going, scrolling so you can read the article yourself. When you want to stop, start. When you want to stop and start it, you could just read. And this is interesting. They all have these wonderful references, like there's a lot of references on this topic. So that's really good. You know, it's not just my 5, but um, all of my articles yes, please continue. Have other references, many references. And so we're coming to the end. This is the last one. I'm just gonna scroll. This is very, very long. So this is Moody again, and they're referring to him, and he had 150 narratives. And in his book, Life After Life, you may want to read it. It was written in 1975. So I'm just scrolling. This article was good in also talking about like EEGs, studying the brain, and the reports that they made. But this is the discussion. Oh, the results. So these are the results. It's a very long article, so I'm so sorry we won't be able to go through it. I just wanted to bring a snippet about NDEs, and you could look more, you could do your own research about it. Yeah. So some of this NDEs, they're also associated with memory. Yeah, that's pretty much it. This article is very heavy. We'd have to really get into it. Okay, so stop the video. All right. All right, so I'm so happy you were able to be with me today. I mean, I just wanted to give a little snippet about NDEs, and it's very fascinating. If you could find books on it, that'd be great. I just brought some journal articles, just to, I'm not taking a stand or anything. I just want to present a little bit, a tidbit of information on NDEs, because it's a new fascination people are having with just what happens after death. And I didn't want to present anything religious. I just want to present facts. And so hopefully you were able to get a little bit about, just common trends that are happening in the research when it comes to NDEs, and some people's explanations of it. So thank you so much for coming. Today's video was just simple. I just wanted to make a simple one because we're gonna do the next one on the 9 personality traits. And so for that one, maybe I'll do a live presentation so that people could chime in and talk about it. It'll be very interesting. I haven't done that in a while. And then we'll have to do a spiritual one. And I'm thinking maybe on prayer, maybe, and we're going to do a clinical one coming up. I have to really try to get that one together. I just want you to be in the know of what's next, of what I'm doing. And so, it's just interesting stuff. And so I'm trying to tackle things that people are talking about, that's in the social sciences, that's in spirituality, and that's in I guess interesting things that people want to learn about. So with that, thank you so much for coming, and I will see you next time. Have an awesome, awesome day. Bye.